Welcome to Footsteps Behind You, where the unknown is always lurking just beyond your reach. Imagine waking up in the dead of night, the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, feeling something, watching you. That's exactly what happened to one of our viewers, and it's a memory that still haunts them to this very day. But that's just the beginning. Tonight, we're diving deep into 5 of the most spine-chilling stories from people just like you. Stories that will make you question what's real and what might be lurking in the shadows. But before we get started, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's journey into the darkness is just the beginning. These stories are only going to get more terrifying, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Let me know in the comments below, because the night is only getting started, and the horror is about to unfold. It was a cold, rainy evening, just like any other. The kind of night where you close your curtains, make yourself a hot drink, and settle into the comfortable hum of your own thoughts. The rain pounded against the windows in a steady rhythm, a comforting sound that usually brought peace. But tonight, it felt like something else. Something darker was lurking outside the window, just beyond the curtain. Something far more terrifying than the storm itself. I had been living alone in my small city apartment for over a year, a place I thought I knew every inch of. My life was simple: work, the occasional dinner with friends, and quiet evenings alone. The type of solitude I cherished. I always considered it safe, peaceful, uninterrupted. But this particular night, I didn't feel that way. The clock on my wall ticked a little too loudly, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence that surrounded me. Everything was normal, yet something in the pit of my stomach told me it wasn't. My mind kept racing, and I couldn't shake this feeling of unease, this strange, gnawing sensation that something wasn't right. At first, I tried to ignore it, brushing it off as nothing. After all, it was just me in my quiet apartment. But I was wrong. It wasn't just me anymore. The wind outside picked up, the sound of it howling against the walls. But then I noticed something else. A soft, slow tap. At first, I thought it was just a branch hitting the window, or maybe a part of the building creaking. But no, this was different. It was a knock, a deliberate knock. Not the kind of knocking you hear when a guest arrives, but something far more calculated. My heart started racing. Tap, tap, tap. I stood up from the couch, a chill running down my spine. The knock came again, louder now. I was frozen, my feet refusing to move as I stared at the door. My mind was telling me it was just the wind, or perhaps a delivery I wasn't expecting. But I knew deep down, this was no ordinary knock. I walked cautiously toward the door, my hand trembling as I reached the peephole. I peered through, expecting to see someone standing there. A neighbor, maybe? But there was nothing. Just the empty hallway outside. My stomach churned with confusion and dread. I pulled away from the door and stepped back, still trying to calm my nerves. But that's when I heard it again, this time louder, sharper. A scraping sound. A sound like fingernails dragging against the floor. It came from the bathroom. I stopped dead in my tracks. I hadn't heard anything before from the bathroom. Not a single sound. The silence had been absolute, until now. Every fiber of my being screamed that something wasn't right. But what could it be? Was I imagining things? I couldn't be sure. But the scratching was undeniable. It was real, and it was getting closer. I couldn't just stand there. I had to check. I slowly turned toward the bathroom, my body moving on autopilot. The house felt colder now, the air thick with something I couldn't explain. I crept forward, each step feeling like it echoed through the empty apartment. My hand reached for the bathroom door, and I paused. The scratching had stopped. Dead silence. I couldn't breathe. What was happening? I pushed open the door, barely a crack at first, just enough to see the darkened interior. There was nothing. No one. Just the usual bathroom, sink, mirror, the faint reflection of myself standing in the doorway. But the unease lingered. Something was wrong. I took another step inside, my feet barely making a sound on the cold tiles. And then it happened. I turned around slowly, feeling a strange pressure behind me, as if someone, or something, was standing right there in the hallway. I saw it then. A figure, standing motionless in the dim light. It was impossible to make out details, just a vague silhouette, almost blending with the shadows. But there was no mistaking it. It was there, watching me. I froze. My blood ran cold. The figure didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stood there, but I could feel its eyes on me, studying me. That's when I heard it. The voice. Barely a whisper, yet it was clear. "Let me in." The words echoed through my mind as I stood paralyzed. Let me in. What did it mean? My pulse pounded in my ears, and I felt a cold sweat begin to form on my skin. I backed away slowly, my eyes not leaving the figure, unsure of what to do next. But when I blinked, it was gone. Gone. Just like that. I rushed to the door, my heart beating faster with every step. The hallway was empty. No figure. No shadow. Nothing. Was I losing my mind? Was I just seeing things? I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I locked it. But then that voice. It came again. Clearer. Louder. This time from inside the apartment. I spun around, my eyes wide with terror. The voice was coming from the closet. I could hear it. Let me in. But no one was there. My breathing quickened, panic rising in my chest. The door to the closet, it wasn't fully closed. It was ajar. I could see a sliver of darkness behind it. I knew deep down that I had to look, but every instinct in me screamed not to. With shaking hands, I approached. The cold air seemed to come from the closet, sending a shiver down my spine. I reached out and slowly opened the door. Nothing. Just my coats, my shoes. Yet the voice, it whispered again, so faint, so chilling. Let me in. It came from somewhere deeper. From the darkness inside the closet. But where? And what was it? My mind raced with questions, but no answers came. I closed the door with a force I didn't know I had. And I ran. I ran as far as I could. Out of that apartment. Away from the voices. From whatever was still lurking there in the darkness. It was late. The kind of late where everything around you seems to settle into an unnerving quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you question if the world outside has just stopped. The wind outside howled like a living thing, slapping against the windows with an intensity that felt unnatural. Thunder cracked through the sky, shaking the walls, but it didn't ease the tension. No, it only heightened it. The power had gone out hours ago, leaving the apartment in an oppressive darkness. My only source of light was the faint glow from my phone, casting long shadows on the walls, making the room feel like it was closing in on me. I was alone. At least, that's what I told myself. The apartment was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of peace, a place where I could shut out the noise of the world. But tonight, it felt different. It felt wrong. I tried to distract myself, scrolled mindlessly through my phone, hoping to push away the anxiety creeping in. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. Something was lurking in the corners of my mind, waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. And that moment came when I heard it, the knock. The first knock came out of nowhere. Just a light tap against the window. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the wind, or maybe the storm. I didn't want to believe it was anything more. But then it came again. Another tap. Softer this time, almost like a whisper. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to make sense of it. Who would be knocking on my window in the middle of a storm? The idea was absurd, but it was real. I rose from the couch, my feet cold against the floor. My heart was beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I walked toward the window, every step heavier than the last. I pulled back the curtain, expecting to see a neighbor, maybe even a lost delivery driver trying to find shelter. But there was no one. The street below was empty, the rain beating down on the pavement in a rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. But then something caught my eye. A small scrap of paper, caught in the wind, fluttering against the ground. I stepped closer, bending down to pick it up. My hands trembled as I unrolled it, unsure of what I was about to read. The paper was soaked, the edges curled and torn, but the words, those words were clear. They read, "Don't let it in." I stood there, frozen, the words burned into my mind. My first thought, it had to be a prank, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The air in the room had changed. It felt thicker, like the walls were closing in on me. And then, just as I stood there staring at the note, the whisper came. I couldn't tell where the whisper came from at first. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't something I could ignore either. It was soft, like a voice calling out from the dark, beckoning me closer. I turned slowly, my pulse racing in my ears, my eyes darting around the room. Nothing. There was no one there. The apartment was still as I left it, but I could feel it. Something had shifted. I looked back at the closet door. I had never paid it much attention before, but now it felt like it was waiting for me. It was almost as if the shadows around it were darker, thicker than the rest of the room. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something was behind that door. And it wasn't the kind of thing I wanted to meet. I approached the door, my fingers brushing against the handle. The whispers grew louder, as if whatever was inside was urging me to open it. My body was trembling. My mind was screaming at me to turn around, to leave, to do anything other than what I was about to do. But I couldn't. I was drawn to it, compelled, as if there was no turning back. Slowly, I twisted the handle and pulled the door open. I expected to find nothing, maybe a coat I had forgotten about, or a box of old things I'd shoved in there. But when the door creaked open, I saw it. Standing in the darkness behind the door, it was taller than anyone I had ever seen, and its eyes, those black, empty pits, were staring right at me. The figure stood perfectly still, its body obscured in shadows, but the presence was unmistakable. It wasn't just an illusion, it was real. My breath hitched in my throat, my knees buckled beneath me, and before I could even react, the figure was gone. Just like that. No sound, no movement, nothing. But I could feel it. The presence was still there, hovering at the edges of my mind. And in that moment, I realized something worse than the figure was waiting for me. Whatever it wasn't finished. It was a stormy evening when it all began. The kind of night where the wind doesn't just blow, it screams. The trees outside groaned under the pressure of the howling gales, and the rain slammed against the windows with such ferocity that it sounded like the house itself was being pounded by invisible hands. I sat in the living room, the only light coming from a single flickering candle on the table. The power had gone out hours ago, and the silence that followed was deafening. There was no hum of the fridge, no whir of the fan, just the sound of the storm outside and the crackling of the candle's flame. Alone in that darkness, I felt the house shift, like it was moving with its own rhythm, as though the walls were breathing, as though the house was alive. My heart raced, my mind running through thoughts of comfort. It's just the storm, I told myself. Just the weather. But deep down, I felt something was wrong. The air was too still, too cold for the heat of the evening, too quiet for a night full of wind and rain. Something was pressing in, waiting for me to acknowledge it, but I couldn't, not yet. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the house settling, or the wind rattling the windows in a way I wasn't used to. But then I heard it, at first a faint sound, almost like the lightest creak of footsteps on the floorboards. I spun around, heart in my throat, but there was no one there. I laughed, nervously, trying to convince myself that it was just the storm, just my imagination. But then I saw something in the mirror. Something that shouldn't have been there. You see, there's a mirror on the wall directly opposite me, and it reflects the entire room behind me. It was one of those mirrors with an old, tarnished frame that I never paid much attention to. But that night, my eyes were drawn to it. At first, I thought it was just the flickering candlelight playing tricks, but when I looked closer, something wasn't right. There in the reflection, I saw movement, a shadow just behind me. I turned quickly, but nothing. No one. Nothing at all. I tried to tell myself it was just the flicker of the candle, or maybe even my own movement, but the feeling of being watched, it never went away. As the hours passed, the feeling grew stronger. The whispers started, soft at first, almost like the wind, but gradually louder. A voice? No, not a voice, not like a person talking, but a sound, scratching at the edges of my thoughts, a murmur I couldn't quite place. I tried to dismiss it, tried to calm myself, but it wasn't just in my head anymore. I walked across the room to check the locks on the door, even though I knew they were secure. My fingers brushed the handle, and for a moment, I stood there frozen. And then as I turned back to the room, I saw it. In the reflection of the mirror, there it was again. That figure, not clear at first, but slowly, as if it was forming right in front of me. A figure dark and cold, standing just behind me, but when I turned to face it, nothing. There was nothing there. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel the room grow colder. And I could hear it now, the whispers growing louder, louder still, like 100 voices murmuring in unison. But it wasn't just voices, it was more than that. It was a presence. Something, watching me, waiting. It was getting closer. With each passing second, the figure in the mirror was moving closer, inch by inch, until I could feel its breath on the back of my neck. But I couldn't see it, not with my eyes, not yet. But I could feel it. I could feel it there, right behind me, just inches away. And then it happened. The room grew even colder, if that was possible. I could see my breath in the air, misting in front of me. I turned to face the mirror again, my eyes wide with fear. I had to see what was happening. I had to know if I was losing my mind. And that's when I saw it, but not in the way I expected. I looked into the glass, and this time, I couldn't see my own reflection. There was no image of me, standing in the room as I had before. Instead, there was a face that wasn't mine. A pale, hollow-eyed figure staring back at me with an empty, soulless gaze. It was standing right behind me. My heart stopped, and I couldn't breathe. The air felt so thick, so heavy, that I thought I might suffocate. I turned, desperate to escape the gaze of the figure, but there was nothing. Nothing but the empty space where it had been, and the echoes of its presence lingering in the air. But I knew it wasn't over. I could still feel its eyes on me, even when I turned away. It was real, and it was waiting. Not just in the mirror, not just in that room, but somewhere inside me now. It was there with me always, and I couldn't shake it. I couldn't escape it. I never saw the figure again, not in the mirror, not in the room. But its presence never left. It was like a shadow I couldn't outrun, an invisible weight pressing down on my chest every time I walked through the house. Sometimes I'd be standing at the kitchen counter, preparing a meal, and I'd feel it. That cold chill crawling across my skin, creeping up my spine. And when I'd turn to glance behind me, the room would be empty. But I knew it wasn't empty. Not really. Every time I passed a mirror, I felt it there. Watching. Waiting. The whispers never stopped either. They were faint like voices just out of earshot, but always there. Always in the background, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. And every time I tried to push it away, every time I told myself it wasn't real, it would creep closer, like a secret I couldn't escape. It made me question everything. My sanity, my perception of reality. Was I losing my mind? Or had something truly followed me? Something that had found a way to slip through the cracks of my world? And if it had, what was it going to do next? I don't know. But I know this, it's still there. I can feel it, right now. And I wonder, will it ever leave? But trust me, this story isn't over. I've experienced things since that night, things that have shaken me to my core, things that have made me question everything. I'll be back telling you more of what happened, more of what I've seen. And maybe you'll wish you hadn't heard it. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Don't forget to subscribe, if you dare. It was a night unlike any other. One of those dark, cold nights when the sky seems to hang lower than usual, suffocating the world beneath it. The storm had been raging for hours, an unforgiving wind that howled as though it were alive, trying to tear the world apart. The trees outside my window were shaking violently, their branches clawing at the walls, and the rain. It wasn't rain. It was as if the heavens had opened up and were trying to drown the earth in an endless torrent. I sat alone in the living room, the dim flicker of a single candle my only source of light. The power had gone out hours ago, leaving the house shrouded in complete darkness. A silence so thick and heavy, it seemed to press in on me, making it difficult to breathe. The kind of silence that's unnatural. I've spent many nights alone in this house, but that night felt different. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. I could hear the walls groaning, the house settling like it was alive. The sound of the storm outside should have been enough to drown out any other noise, but it wasn't. Something felt off. The stillness inside was worse than the roar of the storm. It was a silence that made you feel trapped. The house felt unfamiliar, and that's when I realized something or someone was watching me. My name is Emma. I'm just like any other person. At least I thought I was. I've lived in this old family house for over a decade. This place is my refuge, my sanctuary. Over the years, I've gotten used to the creaks of the floorboards, the groans of the beams, the whispers of the wind, things most people would call normal in an old house. It wasn't until that night that I realized the house had a secret. Something so dark, so terrifying, that it would change my life forever. For years, I'd felt safe here, comfortable in my solitude. The creaks in the walls, the odd sounds in the middle of the night. I had always dismissed them, thinking they were just part of the house's age. But that night was different. That night, I learned that not all noises are just the house settling, and not all shadows are harmless. I learned that sometimes the thing you fear the most is the one thing you never saw coming. It started quietly. At first, I told myself it was the storm. The wind was howling outside, making the house creak and groan like it was protesting the fury of the night. I kept telling myself it was nothing to worry about. I tried to focus on the candlelight flickering in front of me, the only warmth in the house. But then I heard it again. Footsteps. Soft. Slow. Almost calculated. As if whoever it was knew I was listening. I tried to tell myself it was just the storm, the house shifting. But with every step that grew closer, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I could feel it. Something wasn't right. My heart began to race. I checked every window. Locked. Every door. Locked. Nothing was out of place. But the footsteps didn't stop. They grew louder, closer, as though they were following the sound of my heartbeat. I couldn't breathe. My body was frozen in place. I could hear the sound now, clearer, slow, deliberate steps getting closer, closer, until it stopped just outside the room. I held my breath, afraid that even the smallest sound would give me away. But nothing. Nothing except that stillness again. That oppressive silence, hanging heavy in the air, waiting to swallow me whole. I told myself it was just nerves. I had to check. I had to prove to myself that there was nothing to fear. I slowly stood up, my knees weak beneath me. I moved quietly toward the hallway, the beam from the flashlight trembling in my grip. The house felt even colder now. The warmth from the candle seemed like a distant memory. I checked the hallway, the corners, the windows. There was nothing there. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow. Not just a fleeting darkness, it moved. It slipped along the wall, as though it were trying to stay hidden, but I saw it. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I couldn't. I stood there in the darkness, the beam of my flashlight barely cutting through the blackness, and I watched. There it was again, a figure tall, blacker than the night itself, standing at the end of the hallway. I could feel it, staring at me. It wasn't human. I knew that much. The eyes, if they were eyes, were empty, voids of pure blackness, swallowing everything they looked at. And it was staring right at me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed. The figure didn't move. It didn't even blink. It just stood there watching me. And I realized then, it wasn't just watching me. It was waiting. I grabbed the flashlight. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I had to face it. I had to know what it was. I crept toward the hallway, every step feeling like it was dragging me deeper into the darkness. The light from the flashlight barely lit the way ahead, casting long, crooked shadows that seemed to stretch and move. As I turned the corner, I saw it. There was no mistaking it this time. It was right in front of me. A figure, tall, twisted, its limbs far too long. Its body was bent in unnatural angles, as if its bones didn't belong. The face, it wasn't a face at all. It was an empty void, a black hole that pulled everything into it. I tried to scream. I tried to run, but my body wouldn't obey me. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat echoing in the hollow silence that surrounded me. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My body refused to move. The thing didn't speak. It didn't need to. It just reached out, its long fingers twisted, unnatural, reaching toward me. Somehow, I broke free. I don't know how. I turned and ran, my feet stumbling beneath me as I bolted toward the door. My breath was ragged, my chest burning as I raced through the hall. The cold air hit my face as I threw open the front door, and I ran into the night, not looking back. I didn't dare to look back. I ran until my legs felt like they would give out, until the cold rain soaked me through. But then, as I reached the street, I stopped. I turned around, and there it was, standing across the road, watching me. The figure, its empty eyes locked onto mine, waiting. I could feel it. It wasn't done. It wasn't finished with me. I thought I was free. I thought I'd escaped. But the next morning, when I stepped outside to get the newspaper, I found something lying on my doorstep. A mirror, shattered into pieces, the glass reflecting the broken fragments of my life. But as I looked at it, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the broken pieces, I saw my reflection. But it wasn't right. The eyes, those dark, hollow eyes, stared back at me. The same eyes I had seen staring at me in the hallway. The same eyes that had been watching me, waiting. It had never left. It had been there, waiting for me to come back, waiting for me to realize the truth. I wasn't the one in control. It was always watching me. It's been with me this whole time, and it's still waiting. It was a cold, moonless night. The kind of night where even the stars seemed to shrink away, leaving behind only an oppressive darkness. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows as if it were trying to break in. The trees outside swayed violently, their branches scraping against the glass like the fingers of something desperate, reaching for a way inside. Inside, the only light came from a single, flickering candle. Its soft glow barely touched the corners of the room, casting eerie, twisting shadows that stretched across the walls like long, bony fingers. Each flicker seemed to make the shadows grow, to take on shapes that weren't there before. But it wasn't the darkness or the cold that made my skin crawl. No, it was the silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. Like the world has stopped moving, holding its breath, waiting for something. Something I couldn't see but could feel. I'm Sarah. I've always prided myself on being the kind of person who doesn't get scared. I've lived alone for years in this very house, and not once did anything ever really shake me. I've always been able to brush off the little noises at night, the creaks in the floorboards, the gusts of wind rattling the windows. It's all just part of being in an old house, right? But that night was different. Something felt off. Something in the air was thick, heavy with tension, and deep down I knew I wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. But I told myself it was just my imagination, just my mind playing tricks in the dark. But that's where I was wrong. At first, it was small things, innocuous. A flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, a shift in the air, like someone had just walked past me. I'd turn, but nothing was there. Just the empty room, still and silent. But then, the whispers started. Faint at first, like a low murmur in the walls, just beyond my hearing. I'd tell myself it was the wind, the house settling. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct. Words I couldn't make out. Then the shadows. The candlelight dimmed, casting long, twisted shapes that seemed to slither across the room. I could have sworn the shadows were moving, changing, hiding something. And then there was the scratching sound. A soft, rhythmic scrape, like nails on wood, coming from somewhere deep within the walls. It shouldn't have been possible. But it was there. So real, so close. I was paralyzed, unsure if I should stay or run. And that's when I knew something wasn't right. The scratching grew louder, sharper, as though whatever was making the sound was drawing closer. Closer to me. My heart raced, my pulse pounding in my ears. And then from the corner of the room, I saw it. The door to the hallway creaked open, slowly, as though being pushed by an unseen hand. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. There, standing in the doorway, was something I couldn't explain. It wasn't quite human. Not fully anything else, either. It was tall, too tall. Its limbs twisted at unnatural angles, and its skin, it wasn't skin at all. It was like a shadow, an empty space where a body should be. And its eyes, empty voids, dark as the deepest corners of the night. Its mouth, it stretched impossibly wide, far wider than any human mouth could open. It was smiling at me. No, not smiling. Grinning. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, too terrified to scream, too terrified to run. And then it moved. Slowly, with a purposeful step forward. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My hands shook, my legs threatening to give way beneath me. But no matter how fast I moved, it kept pace with me. It wasn't running. It wasn't even walking normally. It was mimicking me. Everything I did, it copied. Every step I took, it took. Every move I made, it followed. The figure wasn't just standing there. It was learning from me. It was copying me. And then the horrifying truth hit me. I wasn't being stalked. I wasn't the prey. I was the one being studied. This thing wasn't after me. It was learning me. Learning how I moved. How I thought. It was trying to become me. I couldn't stay there. I had to leave. I ran, not looking back, my footsteps heavy with panic. The cold air of the hallway bit at my skin, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The feeling of it, of something right behind me, never left. I slammed the door shut, locking myself in. But even then, the presence lingered. Watching. Waiting. I don't know if it's gone. I don't know if it ever will be. There are nights when I still feel it, feel those eyes on me, feel it mimicking me. I can't escape that feeling. And I wonder, maybe it's still out there, still waiting to step into my world, just one step behind me. Have you ever felt like something was following you, or like you were being watched when you were alone? What do you think it could have been? I'd love to hear your stories. Drop them in the comments below, and let's see if we've all experienced the same thing, or if there's something out there we still don't understand. And if you're brave enough, don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales. Who knows, maybe the thing that followed me is waiting for you too.